Now, one of the most common questions we've been getting asked online at the moment is it still a good time to buy the Brisbane property market, or have I missed the boat? Now, to answer this question today, Simon and I are going to go through 12 of the reasons we still love Brisbane right now, as well as a bunch of the negatives, and then you can take that info with a grain of salt and make your own mind up. Either way, with the 2032 games getting closer and closer in Brisbane, we are super excited about the next 5 to 10 years of this market and the long-term future on top of that.
Now, to hit the first reason why I absolutely still love the Brisbane market is just looking back at the history. Because let's be real, neither Ben or I can predict what's going to come next, so all we can really do is look back at history and see how this market's performed. Now, according to an article from Homely that looked at property prices in Brisbane from 1970 to 2016, when you add up the total return and divide it by the 46 years, it increased by an average of 9.7% per annum, which absolutely blew our minds, beating Sydney, Melbourne and Perth over the same period of time.
Now, another reason we love Brisbane at the moment is this Olympic Games. Now, I know there's so much hype online and we don't want to add to that hype, but effectively in Sydney between 1997 and 2003, history shows us that rents almost doubled during that period, and house prices in Sydney went up 97%. Now, neither Simon nor myself believe that Brisbane's going to do 97% just because of the Olympics. And I also don't believe the other hype online where just because it's getting some infrastructure, some people moving here, and some incomes growing, that it's going to magically outperform everywhere else in Australia. In fact, I honestly only believe that the reason that Brisbane is going to do well because of those Olympics is because of speculation. Now, Australians, as much as any other country around the world, love making money without doing absolutely anything for it. And I believe that the speculation in Brisbane is actually going to be the only thing that drives Brisbane over the top at the end.
Now, even if we were to take out the Olympic Games and just talk about the short term, just talk about 2025, well, there's some great predictions coming out from SQM about the Brisbane market. Now, the team over at SQM expect Brisbane to increase by somewhere between 9% and 16% in 2025. Now, whether it ends up at 9% or 16%, who knows where it's going to land, it's still a great return on investment and far above most other capital cities in the country.
Now, one of the things that I love is that when we look at this long-term growth rate, like Simon was talking about, being around about that 9.7% per annum over that 46-year period, what I love about Brisbane right now is when you look at the 10-year growth rates, which is a great leading indicator as to whether a market is overvalued or undervalued based on history right now, there are still suburbs in Brisbane that look well below their long-term averages, doing just 5 or 6% per annum in the last 10 years, which says to me statistically that there's a whole bunch of gas left in the tank and some incredible opportunities if you know where to look.
To add on to this, Brisbane has extremely low vacancy rates at the moment at 0.8% according to SQM. Now, that marks the 4th year in a row where we've seen Brisbane vacancy rates being at chronically low levels. Now, we know as investors, one of our biggest concerns is whether or not we're going to be able to find tenants for that investment property. So knowing that these vacancy rates are super low, knowing that there's not much new supply coming to the market and still a heap of people moving to the city, it's looking like those vacancy rates could trend down for the time being.
Now, I saw an article recently in the Australian Financial Review that was reshared through the ABC, and it was calling for the Brisbane golden age of infrastructure. They are bringing 30 to 50 years worth of infrastructure into Brisbane in the next 7 leading up to the games. Now, the reason that they're doing that is they can fork out massive amounts of money, billions and billions of dollars of private and public works. And with all the tourists that will come in, they will get a huge amount of that paid immediately back in the revenue from the Olympics. So it's great for Brisbane. Everywhere you look, there's something going on at the moment, whether it's new train lines, new schools, new hospitals, upgrades to universities, the first underground metro line in the city's history as well. I was driving down the Gold Coast on the weekend and it's between 3 and 6 lanes each way. It looks like it's going to 5 lanes each way into and out of the city. So incredible amounts of infrastructure coming, which is all good stuff.
Now, another reason why we love Brisbane is investors love to back a winner. And Brisbane has been on a bit of a run over the last 5 years now, where over the last 12 months, we've seen about a 9.7% capital growth rate in the average property throughout Brisbane, which absolutely smashes the national average that sat around 3% last year.
You know, on top of that, people love to follow infrastructure, job growth, and population growth. Now, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, over the next 20 odd years, we're going to see about 25% of Australia's population, job, infrastructure and income growth going into southeast Queensland, with the other 50% being split between Sydney and Melbourne.
Now, before we start talking about some of the reasons we don't like Brisbane, we'll talk about a couple of the things that we absolutely love. Now, the first thing being supply and demand. Now, right now, there is not enough properties being built in Queensland to sustain the population growth that's occurring. In fact, Michael Matusik believes that we're 9,000 properties short per year over the next 5 years to sustain the amount of demand that's required. And this is because there's over 101,000 people expected to move into Queensland every single year for the next 5 years. Now, that population growth rate is significantly above anything we've ever seen in the past, but it's because southeast Queensland has so much to offer, with all of the new jobs being created and all of this infrastructure going in, getting it ready for the Olympic Games, which is the biggest global event every single 4 years. So obviously there's a lot to love about Brisbane, but there's a lot that we don't like about Brizzy as well. So let's jump in and start bagging on it.
You know, the first thing is, in reality, it's not as cheap as it was. Every single week I talk to someone either online or that books a strategy session in with our business, where they go, well, is Brisbane still affordable? Like, can I buy there anymore? Have I missed the boat? And then they go on realestate.com and they look at a suburb that used to sell for 600K, where houses now sell for 750K, and they're like, well, I missed that 150K of growth. And unfortunately, as investors, that is basically everyone in every single market in Australia outside of Darwin right now, effectively. The reality is a lot of people moved back from overseas after COVID, and the Australian government has brought a lot of people in since COVID to prop up the Australian economy. And as a result of that, asset prices have gone up. So it isn't as cheap everywhere in Brisbane as it used to be. And it's certainly not a market anymore where you can buy anything and just know that it's all going to go up. You've really got to pick individual suburbs, individual property types and individual streets to get the most out of the market at the moment.
Another reason why I don't like it is it's more of a seller's market than a buyer's market at the moment, because there's just so much demand, there's so much competition, especially at that lower end of the market between sort of $600,000 and $900,000 at the moment. You know, property prices are going up about $5,000 to $10,000 per month in some of these regions as well, which makes it super competitive, and it means time is money. So you've got to be able to pick the eyes out of the market, identify the right suburb, identify the right property, and get in before someone else snatches it off you.
Now, I was catching up literally this morning with a client of ours that bought in 2020, and he bought his property in a suburb 19 k's from the city, Shayla Park, for 600K, and he recently sold it for over 1.1 million bucks. So the reality is, which is another negative about Brisbane, is that some of these suburbs have literally doubled in the last 3 to 5 year period. Now, while that's great news for people that have bought it, as somebody who's looking to get into those markets, you just have to be much more strategic now.
Now, the next thing that makes it a little bit harder is just the fact that over the last 5 years, we've seen the capital growth rate beat the rental growth rate in Brisbane. So this means that the rental yields have started to drop, because historically Brisbane's had incredible rental yields, but right now we are seeing those rental yields in the low 4% range as a Brisbane average, which means it makes it a little bit harder to hold those investment properties in a negatively geared situation.
Now, an example of this is maybe 2 to 4 years ago, we could have been buying a suburb for $600,000 in Brisbane, and the rent return was between $550 and $650 a week, where today we might have to go out there and spend $750,000 to get the same $600 to $650 a week in rent. Now, one of the positive things that we talked about was that some of the suburbs in Brisbane are sitting well below their long-term 10-year average. But on the flip side, one of the negatives now is that certain suburbs are sitting well above it. So there are suburbs in Brisbane where you can buy that have only done 5 or 7% per annum since the last GFC. But then there's other suburbs starting to pop up all over the city now that are fully priced in for this stage of the cycle, and have done between 9 and even up to as much as 15% per annum in the last 10 years. Now, they're the suburbs statistically that we'd be avoiding for our clients, and that you should be avoiding as an investor at the moment.
Now, because of this, and the final thing that I wanted to talk about as a negative thing that's associated to the Brisbane property market, is just the fact that you can't just go out there and buy any old property in any suburb and expect it to outperform the market average. In fact, you really need to pick the eyes out of the market and identify those regions that still look really attractive and undervalued. As Ben said, out of 423 suburbs that we analyze on a quarterly basis, only about 15 to 20 actually look good below the median house price at the moment. And even some of these more affordable suburbs do actually get affected by flooding. So you've got to really do your due diligence in Brisbane. You know, we have a tropical climate. The cyclone that recently devastated parts of southeast Queensland has shown us why we need to do that due diligence, why we need to do our flood searches, why we need to make sure that we're buying properties in the right location so that we can stay safe from an insurance perspective and make sure that we can look after the tenants that are living in our properties.
Now, I remember back in 2011 when Brisbane got absolutely smashed by those floods, and everyone still remembers that. And every single week a client says, have you made sure we've done a flood search? And I'm like, yeah, we do 3 as part of our due diligence to make sure it's all cool. But on the front page of the Courier Mail, one of the big rags sort of up here in Queensland, they said Brisbane or Jumanji. And it was because, like, legitimately, the main streets of the city were flooded and there were bull sharks, I'm not joking, swimming around like the main street of the city. So it is one of those places where 99% of the city is completely sweet, but if you buy the wrong property in the wrong suburb, in the wrong street, you just want to make sure someone else that's not you is double checking it, like a town planner or solicitor, to cover your own ass.
That just gives me the heebie-jeebies, and I absolutely hate that, being some Sydney boy that's come up here to country Queensland to realise what's actually around up here. But look, at the end of the day, there is still plenty of opportunity in Brisbane, and we hope we've got that across in today's video. Whilst there's some negatives, there is absolutely still some positives, and you have not missed the boat if you know where to put your money in the Brisbane market at the moment. But either way, we just want to bring this information to you guys to help you make a better decision and avoid buying those wrong locations that may be overvalued.
G'day guys, my name's Ben and I'm the director here at Pumped on Property, and I just want to say a massive thank you for watching our content today. Now, if you're thinking about buying an investment property in the next 3 to 12 months, then the team and I would love to offer you a one-on-one strategy session. In that session, we can talk about exactly where you are right now, where you'd like to be longer term, and we can deeply educate you on the Australian market. And then you can take that information and go and absolutely smash it on your own, or potentially become one of the small number of clients that we work with each week. To book your session, all you have to do is go to www.pumpedonproperty.com and click that book your free strategy session button. But either way, we wish you all the best on your journey as an investor to financial freedom. That was 3 words in one. That was mad. I don't even know how your brain did that. That was mad.